Good morning, everyone. Hold on one second. We are live today from the golf course. Let me bring on my screen. We're live today from the golf course, broadcasting. We're adding and welcoming our guest today, Wole. And what I'm really excited to share with you is the conversation around finances. And what you don't understand is that someone like Wole has come from JP Morgan Chase, has had a career in banking, and can legitimately talk about the problem that he's looking to solve and what MoCaFi does to solve the problem regarding equitable financing, but then also access to money and just being serving the underserved in the banking community. One thing I'd like to shout out: on August 31st, we are having a fundraiser for Finer Life Golf Foundation. Finer Life Golf Foundation provides golf or access to golf to kids in the inner city. We recently completed a 5-week program. Actually, this week is the final week. So please come out and support. It is a fundraiser at Pelham Split Rock, where hip hop was founded in the Bronx. And so let's get started. No more talking to me. Let's bring Wale to the screen.
Hi, good morning, LJ. How you
Hold
feeling?
on. I am great. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Very well.
Wonderful. I am broadcasting live from North Hills Country Club in the rain for there is a Women's Builder Council golf outing.
Oh, fantastic. So,
Yes,
you're living your truth.
I am. I am. And you are as well. Please tell us more about your journey to MoCaFi.
I sh Absolutely. So, I spent 10 years at Citigroup learning how financial services works, and then learned how to manage people at scale at Willis, where I was the chief operating officer for several years, and then went to JP Morgan, where I was a managing director, and spent time understanding how treasury services works and how the credit card business works, and then how small business works. I was the number two guy in business banking nationally. And then I had my George Floyd moment after the death of Michael Brown, where I was watching those images in Ferguson, and people were in the streets really crying for help, saying, "Look, we've got a real problem in our communities." And Ferguson is no different than many other Black communities across the country, where they're just saying, "Hey, we've got to have a social justice plan." And people are all about that. And then I realized, looking at those images, which reminded me of the images that I saw when I was a history major watching Eyes on the Prize, that great documentary about the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And 1968 looked a lot like 2014. And I wanted to use my time and talents to build financial products and services to help our community. And the thought process was, you can't have social justice without economic justice. And I wanted to work on the economic justice part. So I quit JP Morgan and decided to start MoCaFi, to be that other hand clapping, if you will, in the movement to move our communities forward.
Wow, that is such a powerful, inspirational story. And when we think about why we do something and the motivation behind that. But tell us more about the name MoCaFi.
Yeah, so coming up with a name is always a fun uh, experiment, if you will. And so played around with a couple names and came up with mobility, because I was thinking about community mobility, capital, and the a mass of capital and the role that capital plays in mobility, and then finance, which is the idea that we're going to get some lending dollars to people. And so mobility, capital, finance, and then like most things, you get shortened, and you got to have a cool sort of name in the fintech space. So mobility, capital, finance became MoCaFi.
I love it. And, I don't think that there's a true understanding of the obstacle or the challenge that you're solving. I think people make the assumption because you have a job, you have a bank account. But talk to us about the root cause and really what it is that MoCaFi is doing to transition and move the community forward.
Yeah. So the issue is one where you've got 50+% in the African American community and Latinx community that are unbanked or underbanked. And it's very, as James Baldwin said, it's expensive to be poor. And so if you're unbanked or underbanked, then that's code for you've got to spend money to get your money, right? Whether it's going to a check casher, a pawn shop, a payday lender, a title loan. And that industry or those industries generate, in excess to 150, 175 billion dollars a year. Black families can spend more money on financial services, overdraft fees, ATM fees than they do on food. And if you look at it over the lifetime of an individual, that individual can spend $41,000 in excess fees. So we're trying to put products and services in the market that enable individuals to move away from those kinds of products to ones that are free, that many of us take for granted, right? So, in traditional banking, you leave excess balances in your demand deposit account and you don't get charged any fees. And because the bank's able to use your idle balances to make loans to other people and generate other dollars, and the give back is you don't have to pay for your checking accounts or pay to make deposits. But if you're somebody who doesn't have excess deposits left in your account, then you get stuck with having to pay those fees. So we've built a product that eliminates those fees for people, but it has all the great services, Apple Pay, Google Pay. And at the same time, we've turned stores like 7-Eleven or Dwayne Reed or CVS into bank branches where people can put cash into their account as if they're going to a teller at a Chase or a Citibank branch, where they can take cash out of the ATM machines for free. That's one part of our business. The other part of our business is there's a lot of money that the government has at the city level, the state level, the federal level, that needs to get to folks. And we noticed how this played itself out during the pandemic, where you might get a check. If you don't have a checking account, then it slows down the process to get access to your funds. You got to pay for it. And so we've created a whole disbursements platform that governments can use, that not-for-profits can use, that corporates can use to get resources to people. So those are the two sides of our business, and we do it in a way that is seamless, not a lot of barriers to use the product, and it has very low cost. And then at the same time, we put people on a path. Once you get your sort of the basics down, then we can start thinking about how do we build your credit, how do we enable you to start saving some money to buy a house, and then if people go on that journey with us, then hopefully we can get you to home ownership if that makes sense for you.
No, that is the best way to describe the journey. It's a financial journey. First, I learned to save. Then I learned to be more responsible with how I spend my money and where I spend my money. And then I start to see myself acquire a savings and think about what are some of the long-term goals that maybe people were afraid to dream. So I think so the conversation is all around the entrepreneur's playbook. So we have to go back to how you started and just even the mindset that you needed to have to take on, I am going to found my own bank. But before we do that, I want to just help the audience understand your market analysis and understanding the fear that's often tied to why people don't bank, or the fear around not actually having their own bank accounts, or what are some, it's not always just people haven't learned to get a bank account. There's some other things that you're also tackling with the work that you're doing.
No, that's 1000% correct. I mean, if you just look at, historically, the first bank that was focused on the African American community was the Freedmen's Bank, and it was founded as a part of the Emancipation Proclamation. President Lincoln created a bank for freed slaves as well as returning veterans of the Civil War to put their money in an account, and people flocked to that bank, and they thought it was under the auspices that it was protected by the U.S. government, and it wasn't. And the folks that were managing it were not good bankers, and they frittered the money away, and the bank ultimately collapsed. They brought in Frederick Douglass to try to save it. He put his own money in, and it went down. And I think that was the beginning of the end in terms of the building of trust that the Black community had in traditional banking institutions. And so if you look at it historically, you layer on top of that redlining, where if you lived within a community that on a map that had a red line around it, you wouldn't get loans, or the loans you'd get were at higher interest rates, and the like. And then at the same time, you have most recently in the last decade or so, 80% of the bank branches that have closed in this country have been in low and moderate income communities, a lot of those Black communities. And so just historically speaking, and in the modern day, banks have moved away from serving our communities, what's been replaced has been the payday lenders and the check cashers, pawn shops, as we talked about. And so as a result, that's built a sort of a over time, just a sense of, hey, as a customer, you don't really want my business, right? You're not building institutions, you're not doing the kind of community outreach. And a great example of that is what there's a book, Lisa Servon, I think is the name of the author. She followed the life of people who took advantage of the check cashers, for example, and they're open when people are need them. It's not 9 to 5. It's 6 a.m. to midnight, because it's open when people may not be working. And so there's a great example. One of her stories is someone gave a tip to somebody who cashed their check after they paid a fee for their check, because those institutions were set up in such a way to say, we want your business. Now, the flip side of that is it's extractive, and it takes value away from the community, but they're providing a real service. So it's a complicated framework. And the other reality is, just because you may not have a lot of cash at the moment doesn't mean you're not very sophisticated. And in fact, I would suggest that when you have moments of not having a lot of cash, that's when you become even more sophisticated, because you got to figure out how to make a dollar holler, and you got to figure out how to make money last, and be very creative in terms of that. So I think we find ourselves in our organization saying, you know what, we think we can take advantage of the banking infrastructure that exists in this country, tailor it so it solves the problems of our target customer, and figure out how to do it in a responsible, sustainable way. And the last thing I would say is, historically, in financial services, innovation happens at the top of the pyramid, and there's an expectation that it'll trickle on down to the mass affluent and below. And that typically gets stuck in the mass affluent, and it never gets to the bottom third of the pyramid. And so people are left with the kind of exploitative products we've talked about. And so we're reimagining that, starting from the bottom up. And, so far we're getting some good traction in that model.
The entire financial market and the housing crash is built on exploitive products, right? Things that were not really looking at the risk and looking at what's happening or who's going to be able to pay that. And, you could do an entire case study on how many times this has happened over and over again, but there's not really a lot of conversation around, well, whose responsibility is to act in a responsible manner. If you're giving me money, then I'll take it, but not really thinking about the consequences of that. So with MoCaFi, one of the things I'm curious to know, as the brand is being positioned for the underbanked and underserved, isn't it true that you'd want everyone to bank with MoCaFi because, assets under management, it helps with the bank and the performance and the work that you do. So as a person with a regular bank account, or they that are already banking, shouldn't they bank with MoCaFi as well?
Absolutely. We think we can serve everyone very, very well. I'll give you a good example of why that's the case. So you think about taking your rent payments, and rent payments for many of us is the biggest expense we have on a monthly basis. There's not a very easy, repeatable way to take rent payments and report those to the credit bureaus. You can do that on the MoCaFi platform. And so it doesn't matter sort of where you are on the economic scale. We can help move people forward. And we also don't have fees. And so we're very proud of what we've built. We have FDIC insured accounts. They're demand deposit accounts. They are ones where we can make it really easy for you to do your direct deposit onto our platform. So we want all customers. We do not in any way, shape, or form limit who might participate on our platform. But we are, though, saying that we were being very intentional in that we want to make sure that folks who traditionally have not felt that there's been real outreach in terms of their product, their business on a banking platform, we want those folks as our customer while we go out and make sure we're open to business for everybody.
Absolutely. You mentioned something that is very important, and I don't know, for the people listening, they may understand the concept of being FDIC insured. But
Yeah.
as a startup bank, how did you move the needle forward to partner or become FDIC insured? Because I have to imagine it's no easy feat to and the paperwork is probably tremendous to get that type of backing, which is,
Yeah,
when you listen to people that may not understand, they don't understand why a Silicon Valley bank crashed, or they don't understand, they understand that all banks are FDIC insured, but they don't understand when they are not and when they are. So
yeah,
tell us more about like your process to becoming FDIC insured in
yeah.
layman's terms, obviously, because
No, yeah, no, because it's got to make sense to the everyday person for sure. So we basically have built a fintech, financial technology company that's not dissimilar from Chime or Varo or MoneyLion. And basically, what we did was we came up with the marketing and the customer support and the branding and all that kind of stuff. And so we are what they call the program manager. We then went out and found terrific partners to help us bring our product and idea to life. So we use MasterCard, which is a fantastic partner, is our network. So our cards are MasterCard branded. We use a company called Galileo, which is the processor, which is the one that keeps sort of the ledger of our accounts. And then we use a company called Sunrise Banks, which is our sponsor bank, and we take advantage of their compliance, their FDIC infrastructure and access to the ACH rails, and that allows us to create our MoCaFi account. You can see this here. And one of the things about Sunrise Banks that we like so much is that they are a B Corporation bank based in Minnesota that's focused on banking with values. And so we said, as we build our infrastructure, we only want to have first-class partners who understand the importance of our mission. Galileo, MasterCard, and Sunrise reflect that. And by putting it together under the MoCaFi brand, we are able to provide high-quality, low-cost services to our customers.
Well, okay, so there are a few things that come to mind. One, we have to talk about the entrepreneurial journey. And
Right.
the reason this comes to mind is because in your family, there are other entrepreneurs. Like I believe it was your great grandfather. So in your blood was the spirit of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you're talking about, finding partners that are aligned with your mission, is critical for building up your business. Talk to us about going from inception to planning to execution and this reality that we're in now, where MoCaFi is it is a product in the market. I have a MoCaFi card. I can't flash mine like that because I don't know where my purse is. But I mean, I should have been on brand and on schedule, but I wasn't. But regardless, tell us
That's
about that.
all good, and we appreciate your business. And I think one of the things that's wonderful about all communities, but in the Black community in particular, is we come from a tradition of entrepreneurs, right? And you just go back in all of our families, you hear, whether we like it or not, we come from folks who were sharecroppers, or we come from folks who were small artisans, small business owners, or artisans, and whatnot. And so my story is very much an African American story, or my great grandfather, who you mentioned, and I appreciate you doing your homework, he had a sixth grade education. He grew up in Charleston, West Virginia, and he saw his parents were slaves. He was born in the 1880s, right after slavery ended, but his parents told him stories about it. Anyway, after his sixth grade education, he went off and started his own personal journey, which led to him going into the real estate business. And in the real estate business, he was able to create opportunities, really home ownership for lots of people in that Charleston, West Virginia community, and use that as a platform to do a couple things. And it was really inspiring for me and my family over the many generations. But again, it's an American story. He used his platform to integrate the library, to integrate the swimming pool, the restaurant, at the airport in Charleston, West Virginia. His son was responsible for arguing the Brown v. Board of Education case on behalf of the state of West Virginia. And he then, towards the end of his life, he was head of the deacon board of his church, First Baptist Church in Charleston. And he said, the church is an important part of the community, but we also need an entrepreneurial set. So he ended up buying the land right next to the church and built a 2-story building and put retail on the first floor. And then he put offices on the second floor, and then would invest in the individuals who wanted to start their own businesses. So there were barbershops, and there were restaurants, and other retail stores on the first floor. And in fact, when individuals didn't have enough money to buy the equipment, he would lend them the money so they could start their businesses. And that was a big. And then on the second floor, there were offices for the accountants and lawyers. They even had a dance studio. So anyway, that was a big engine for economic growth in the Charleston, West Virginia community. And I grew up sort of in that space and spending time there. He used to actually, the first office was his, where people could come pay their rent on a monthly basis for the homes that he had provided. So that was just sort of in my DNA, and sort of got to see. And so that experience. And one thing actually interesting, he wanted to build a bank, or he wanted to start a bank, and he was never able to pull that off in his lifetime. So I sort of feel like I'm finishing up some unfinished business that he started. But that, at the same time, with my experience, particularly working at Citigroup, when part of a small company before it became Citigroup, Commercial Credit. Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, was the number two guy. The CEO at the time of Commercial Credit was a guy named Sandy Weil. And they were able to take that small company and evolve it over time into Citigroup. And that was a very powerful experience for me to be a part of, because it helped me see the power of financial services and the impact that building companies can have on communities. So that, plus my experience that I just shared with you, my family experience, sort of made MoCaFi sort of more than a twinkle in my eye, but something that I could action upon and build. And I gotta say, there's nothing more satisfying in the entrepreneurial journey than being able to take an idea, bring it to life, and then have others join the journey. We've got about 40 people on the MoCaFi team now, and they've all sort of they're making a huge impact every day. And it's a real honor for me to have folks who've committed themselves to taking this journey and moving it forward.
That is amazing. And one of the other things that you do is you're also partnering with governments. Tell
Yeah,
us more about how that's a differentiator for you in the work that you're doing.
yeah, it's a great question. So I'll give it to you in a nutshell. So Mayor Garcetti, who was then a couple of years ago mayor of Los Angeles, said, "I want to create contactless government. I want a way for residents to have single sign-on for city services, a way for residents to be able to receive money electronically from the city, and a way for the residents to be able to pay for city services electronically." Prior to the pandemic, the water company received $1 million a day in cash from folks, and there are 500,000 people who don't have bank accounts in Los Angeles.
Wow.
We were able to white label our platform and create the Angelino Connect account. So now there's a disbursement platform where they've gotten over $70 million to Angelinos on our platform for things like rental assistance, universal basic income, emergency assistance, and they also have our banking product, and so our demand deposit account product. So we now have built the plumbing that the city of Los Angeles can use to get resources to people. We've replicated that in Birmingham, St. Louis, and I'm very excited. We're making some really great progress with the city of New York. And when you have me next, I'll have a chance to tell you hopefully a little more detail what we're doing in New York. But it's really an innovative way of addressing a market need that every city across the country has to get resources to people. And with our platform, they can do it very efficiently with no friction.
Absolutely. I mean, the pandemic was a great example of where people couldn't get access to funds or couldn't get the support they needed to keep their homes or to even feed their families. And that was an unfortunate way to find out that people didn't have bank accounts.
Right. Absolutely. And it's one of those things where you see these problems coming, but it's easy to not do anything about it until you have to do something about it. And then it's oftentimes too late to do it in a thoughtful way. And so we're really trying to position all communities across the country to be able to get resources to people efficiently. And you can just see the impact of the warming of the planet is having higher frequency, higher severity incidents where it's really important to get resources to people. And we want to be a part of that solution.
Yeah, I mean, there's a saying that one of my classmates would offer: "You can't boil the ocean." But I think at this point, we're actually trying to do little pockets of improvement here.
Well, yeah, but our behavior is actually boiling the ocean as water temperatures go up, and if we're not careful, we'll find ourselves in a real serious situation. But one of the things to your broader point about being focused is, as an entrepreneur, and you know this all too well, is you really have to focus on one of the 2 or 3 things you're going to do really, really well. Lean into that, build your business around that, and then over time, you can use that as a platform to expand into other things.
Absolutely. And while we only have 3 minutes, I think we have to just have another follow-up session live when you have all of the news to announce about New York City, because I
Yes,
imagine there will be a lot of great things coming.
yes.
But what I'd love for you to share in these last few moments is there was a moment when you were working in corporate where you had to pull the plug and you've decided, I am not going to stay in this corporate environment because there's something I need to build. There are a lot of entrepreneurs listening that may be investing in their dream, but may not necessarily know, like, am I doing the right thing? Or there are individuals that are in their job and they have this idea that's been planted maybe generations before.
Mhm.
Tell us more about your personal experience in saying, you know what, this is it. I'm going to do it. I can be a banker, but I can be the bank.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just a culmination of all those moments. But there was a news piece on WNYC uh, when I was still at JP Morgan that came out and said, what's worse, being unemployed or underemployed? And the conclusion of the analysis was it was worse to be underemployed because you have all this talent and all this capability and you're not being able to use it fully. And that's really sort of how I felt at that time. And I thought, you know what? The benefit about being unemployed is you actually have the freedom to be able to find that opportunity that takes the most advantage of all the talents. And so that plus the Michael Brown, plus I also, and I think that anybody who's deciding to be an entrepreneur has got to be a person that is an optimist and one with confidence, that I recognize that if I wasn't successful in this journey, I probably would be able to find another job and put the corporate suit back on and get back at it. But for me, it was I'd rather try and fail than to get the gold watch and look at my retirement and say, you know what, I wish I had done something. So, I think my advice to all the entrepreneurs out there is you've got greater capability than you realize. And there's a great phrase, I'll get it wrong, but the concept is if you put your dream out there and talk about it, the universe conspires to make that happen. And I can only encourage as many people as possible to put their dream out there and let the universe conspire to help them make it a reality.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I feel like that's a great place for us to pause versus end. And for anyone interested in getting an account, how do they do that?
So they can go to wherever they get their apps and download the MoCaFi app, or they can go to our website, www.mocafi.com, MOCAFI.com, and they can start the journey there.
So it's completely online.
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely. Simple, easy to do, easier than downloading some of these other apps. So
That's
thank you. Thank you for joining us today. And we look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thank you so much, LJ. I appreciate you.